Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm Donald Grodoff, family coach with FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com. In the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast series, I delve into the hidden characteristics of OCD, anxiety, and anxiety disorders. The things that most people don't see, that are behind closed doors and shut within the mind about anxiety. My goal with these podcasts is to bring about awareness of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Understand that I am not a doctor, therapist, or counselor, and the content, information, resources, and ideas that are talked about and brought up here in these podcasts are things that I have used, discovered, or have been recommended to me, and I always recommend to seek additional professional help in finding solutions for yourself. Thank you for listening and enjoy the podcast. This podcast was recorded September 1st, 2017, and this is a special podcast for OCD Week, which runs October 8th through October 14th, 2017. And this podcast is called The 8 Reasons Why People Don't Get Treatment for Mental Illness. Now, the reason I bring this in, it does mention mental illness, but what I'm going to concentrate on talking about is OCD involved with this. And this is by Dr. David Sussman. He's got a blog. And in this blog, he talks about a 2004 report by the World Health Organization. And in that report, they're talking about the number of people that don't get treatments. And he breaks it down into some specific disorders or illnesses. And one of them, of course, is obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. And it talks about 59% of people with OCD don't get treated. Now that number may have changed because awareness of OCD and awareness of it has grown over the years. So it may have come down, it may have gone up because more and more people are getting into mental illnesses because of all the strife and stress that we go through on a daily basis. But in this blog, he talks about the 8 reasons why they don't get treatment. And so I wanted to kind of go through those because I think that's really important. I think it's something, especially with OCD, people don't understand it. They don't know really that that's what they have. They think it's something that's just a problem of organization or that, I'm just a neat freak. It's nothing, no problem. But, when it comes down to it, OCD can really tear apart our life. And so we really need to get treatment and get the right treatment. And I think that's one of the other problems too, is that the right treatment isn't out there. But let's go down the list and let's talk about what he sees as the reason, and I agree. And of course, the first one he talks about is fear and shame. It's one of the most common reasons is that people feel ashamed of saying that they have a mental disorder. And it's not so much of a problem now. It's getting better and better at being okay to go see a doctor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. It doesn't have quite the stigma it probably did even 5 years ago. But it still falls in line with, because we don't want to be labeled as mentally ill or crazy. Such a label could actually negatively impact our career, our education, or just our life goals as such, and cause us to go into a real depressed state. And what's interesting is I see, from what I've seen in the work I've done, is that people with OCD tend to want to hide that. They tend to lie about it or fib about it. Let me put it that way, because I don't want it to sound, they're doing it because they're just so embarrassed by it that they tend to lie about it. The second thing he talks about is lack of insight. They don't realize how bad it is, or they don't realize really the consequences of it. It's kind of like getting gray hair. It sometimes comes on slowly, that you get used to it, so you don't even see it as how badly it is messing up your life, or how bad the consequences of what it's doing to your family or friends or whatever. But it does grow larger, and it says here, if someone truly believes they aren't sick, they feel no need to seek or accept treatment. And they, that I see that can be true, very true. Um, then number 3, he calls it limited awareness. You one of the statements he says in here, my problems aren't that bad. Or you're making too much of it. It's not really that bad. They just don't realize how strong it is. They lack a full awareness of it. Number 4, he talks about feeling of inadequacy. They are inadequate or failures, which, in OCD, it leads to depression. That's one of the, I don't know if I want to call it a side effect, but one of the things that trails off of OCD is depression. And if they feel like a failure because they don't feel like they can handle it. One of the statements he puts in here, should be able to handle things. Now this is a blog from June 11th of 2015 that he did on his site, davidsussman.com, I believe is what it is. Hopefully I can put that up on the site. So they want to believe that they don't need assistance in it, that they should be able to handle it. And there the shoulds come out. I think I've talked about that in some of the other podcasts. We tend to should on ourselves. And shoulding is just a guilt-ridden kind of concept. It has a lot of guilt back behind it that pushes it forward. Because it's basically saying whatever I did back there I didn't do right, and I could have done it, I should have done it a different way, blaming yourself for something that's already over with, So the shoulds come out. Number 5, he talks about distrust. It's difficult to consider revealing personal details to a doctor or counselor, one that you don't know. He puts a statement in here, telling a stranger. Some of the, with OCD, one of the forms of it, I guess you'd say, is sexual OCD, where you think some really sexual thoughts that are very disturbing thoughts. And I could see where that would be extremely difficult to share with anybody, and including yourself. A lot of times it's so embarrassing you don't even want to think about it yourself, and it becomes everything you can do to try to stop it because you've beat yourself up for it, you feel like you're bad, all of that. And so there can be a distrust even of yourself, but even more so of telling it to someone else outside of yourself, a doctor. Even if they're professionals, it's hard to open up to that place, So number 6, he talks about hopelessness. Oh my God, that really is one of the biggest places I think OCD can take you. And for that matter, really mental illness itself, like the subject of this, this blog is about mental illness. But it can lead you to a place of hopelessness. And, there were so many times in the deals I went through with my daughter that, she was kind of a zombie, that she wasn't really there. There was a glossed over look in her eyes. And the feeling of hopelessness felt like a stabbing knife in the heart, ripping it apart almost. So I am very much of a person that can understand hopelessness. And, and I can only imagine what it felt like to me probably was 100 times worse for my daughter. Feeling like it, because so many times she would have she yelled out to me, I just don't want this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I hate this. And then she had suicidal tendencies because of it. And that's what it can lead to. So, it can lead to that. They believe that nothing will help them. I'll never get better. These beliefs can be due to depression or hopelessness and can be substantial roadblocks to seeking help, is what he states it in here. And I believe that. If we hadn't gotten with my daughter some glimmers, some little cracks in the shell of hope. There were moments, and I say moments because they would last sometimes just a matter of a couple of minutes, maybe an hour, where she would break down and cry and be willing to be held, or be willing to talk about it, or be willing to just let go. But it wouldn't last very long, and OCD would come back in and bring it right back up. So that if we hadn't had those little glimmers throughout the process that we went through with my daughter, and I see this with clients too, it would have been a whole different story. So hopelessness, and the big part about it, and this is why I have family OCD, because it also affects the family as much as the person. I think sometimes, and I don't want to diminish what the person goes through, because what they go through usually is a lot tougher, a lot bigger with OCD than the family does. But the family suffers along with them, and it really is a family affair to it. Because, like I said, that's one of the reasons I brought family OCD into this, and decided that because you really need to work with everybody, because not only are they affected by it, but they also are part of the treatment. The family has to be in on it. The family has to be there for it. So it's very important for that. Number 7, he talks about in this unavailability. And I saw this too. You get into this place of hopelessness and all, because you can't find the resources. I guess, probably compared to 10 years ago or 20 years ago, there's so many more resources. We have the IOCDF.org site, the OCD Foundation, which gives a lot of good resources, a lot of good information. I put a lot of good information and resources on my site, at least I believe I do, the Family OCD site. But when we got into it, this for us, it was about 7 years ago. When we got into it, we didn't know where to turn. We didn't know who to go to, what to go to. I think we found that site. I can't remember, but we really didn't even know the definition of it. It took us a while to really figure out what it is and where to go for it. So it's hard to find. And I can imagine being in like a small town could be even harder, because you can find on the internet. And now we're starting to get into the online treatment, where people, like even myself, do online treatments of it. So you can do it by Skype or by Zoom or some form. So even if you're in a small town, a lot of times internet can be effective. But it's really good to find a therapist, and those can't always be found. So it may not be available, but now, like I say, there's online help and research and all of that you can find that can help a lot, that it can at least define it for you, and then you can take patterns from that and go. And number 8, it talks about practical behavior, or practical barriers. And I'll mention some of that. I'll read it here from what he says. Another common barrier to mental health care is inability to pay for the treatment due to financial hardships or lack of health insurance. That is a real barrier, because treatments can cost, medications can cost. All of that has a cost to it, and trust me, I know that place. Been in that place. It drains you financially, because here again, as I talk about with any disorder, but OCD especially, is that you, as a parent or as a caregiver, you're shooting for anything you can. Let's try this miracle. Let's see if this miracle works. Let's try this treatment. Let's try this. One of these has got to work. And we're searching for that. And it's not really just one anyway, but it is multiple. And that's what we found. But you grab a lot of these treatments that don't work. Even something like CBT doesn't always work for OCD. So you can go through that, and I've had clients that have been through that and not seen the results that they can get, like even with the EFT I do, or the ERP, all of that. So that's a problem. Not having reliable transportation, childcare issues, all tie into this. They can, appointments can conflict with work or school or different schedules. That can all prevent you. So what I would suggest with this is not to be afraid to ask for help. A neighbor, a relative, a brother, a sister, a friend. Because that was one of the toughest parts we went through personally, and I find it with clients too, is just asking somebody for help. And they're not going to kill you for doing it, you know. And if the costs are high, see if you can negotiate. See if you can talk with the person, the therapist, and say, look, I'm in a really tough place. Can we work out something? Don't be afraid to ask. Because, if it isn't treated, if this is not treated, then there are problems. It grows and it builds and it gets worse. So yes, it may be costly for you at the beginning, but I tell you, if you let it go, say for instance, with my own daughter, she was young. She was, 7.5, 8 years old when we got into this. And in thinking about it, I am glad it didn't come out in the teen years, because it would have been harder to change things at the teen years. Nothing against teens. That's just the way they are. They're more, I don't know if I want to say combative, but they're more on their own, individuals then. And so trying to change them and guide them differently, and I've seen this with clients, is a difficult task. So, the earlier you do it, the better you do it, the better it'll be. The less costly in the long run that it will be. So you may look at this cost and say, wow, that's a lot of money. But what will be beneficial for you is, in the long run, getting it early, getting it done, and getting it done properly. Like I say, the ERP is one of that. And it is hard to trust, but it's pushing yourself to trust that you can do it. Searching and researching is very important to be able to really find the treatments that work. And, to humble yourself too in the fact that, what, it's okay to have a disability. It's okay to have a disorder, an illness. That it doesn't show weakness or failure. What shows weakness or failure more would be to ignore it and to say that, it's nothing. And it's not going to pay off for you in the long run to do that. So it's really, biting the bullet, I guess, if you want to say. And you got to with ERP, it's kind of having to push yourself to do it, to trust and to ask. Do not be afraid to ask. Ask for help. Ask for financial methods, help, whatever you can get. Find organizations that will be there to help you, that might be free. And I'm going to continue, as I go through my practice, to continue to find the best resources and put them out there and get them out there. And I think it's wise for you to do the same, to really research it and not be stopped by the fact that it's too hard or too much. It will be tough, but it will be in the long run. As it says here, a person may function fairly well on the surface or on the outside and can generally conceal their mental health concerns. But I promise you, if it is not gotten out and stuffed down inside of you, it will find a way to come out, and it may come out in a way that you do not want. It may come out like it did with my daughter, in violence and anger. And that wasn't due to the fact that we'd ignored it or stuffed it down, but letting it go and just letting it build and fester within you does not help it and does not make it better. So I hope this helps in understanding some of the reasons that people don't, so that you can turn it around and be a person that does get help. Thank you. That concludes this podcast. Please leave me a comment or question below. That gives me good direction where to go on future podcasts. I would love to hear your invisible wheelchair stories if you're willing to share it. If you would, go to invisiblewheelchair.com and click on Tell Your Story. I want to remind you that OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is treatable, and I can help you get past OCD. So if you have heard this podcast and others, and you feel like you need further assistance and would like to spend some time with me working through any issues you have, then feel free to book a session at focusedhealthyfamily.com or familyocd.com, or you can call me at 704-562-1630. I also offer $85 off initial discovery session if you mention that you heard it on this podcast. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast and will join me for the next one. Remember to keep tapping, talking, and transcending your life to new heights. Thank you, and have a great day.